Hello, heart-centered child and family practitioner. Welcome to Holding the Work, Reflections for Child and Family Practitioners. My name is Ashleigh and I'm a children's therapist, social worker and supervisor. I created this podcast as a reflective space for practitioners working with children, parents and families. Whether you're a social worker, a counsellor, play therapist, psychologist, case manager, or any other practitioner who works with children and families, this podcast is a place for us to pause, think about the work, and keep growing in ways that are ethical, trauma-informed, relational, and really honours the people that we work with as well as you as a practitioner. I'm recording this episode on Mulwinawina country in the Hobart area of Lutruwita, Tasmania. I acknowledge the Palawa people as the traditional owners of the country that I'm working from today, and I pay respects to elders past and present and express my gratitude for the knowledge, wisdom and law that has been and continues to be shared on this country today. So thank you so much for joining me in this episode of the podcast. I'm really glad that you're here listening in on this conversation. So we're moving into a bit of a new season here at Children's Therapy Tasmania. And I guess what I mean by that, a new season, is if you're following on my blog or in part of my receive my email newsletter, we're shifting into a different space, particularly around practitioner wellbeing. So with this episode of the podcast, I really want to begin by having a conversation that feels quite timely, but also deeply important. And as I mentioned before, this conversation is about our wellbeing as practitioners. It's about sustainability, and it's about what it means to continue showing up in this work with children and families in a way that's ethical, grounded, compassionate, and human. And perhaps most importantly, it's a conversation about the kind of supports we need if we want to keep doing this work with care over the long term. So over the next few episodes of the podcast, I'll be sharing a series of reflections and curious wanderings, particularly focused on the wellbeing and sustainability of us as practitioners working with children and families. And I want to do this and talk about these things in a way that's more proactive, not when people are already exhausted, depleted, emotionally frayed, or quietly wondering, like, how much longer can I keep going, keep doing this? And I want to do this proactively because by the time burnout becomes visible, much has already been carried for too long. So I guess what really prompted me to move into this different season has really come from, I guess, what I had observed in my previous role in leadership, leading a school counselling team, but also, I guess, being a practitioner. I think I'm 12 years in the work now. And I guess I'd noticed a familiar pattern that tends to emerge or starts to emerge around this time of year. So this time, so I'm recording this particular episode on, it's, so in Hobart, we're heading into the second week of the school term, term 2. the weather's starting to get a little bit colder, and we're starting to get into those winter season. And I guess what I'd noticed is that particularly this type of year and over the colder winter months, many practitioners begin to feel a lot flatter, more tired, and a lot more worn down. And the initial momentum for when we started the school year has well and truly faded. Caseloads are often full now, and if not, referrals just keep coming in. And the pressure of getting all of the admin work done is starting to build. The complexity around the work itself is beginning to accumulate, and just the emotional labour of holding children, family systems, navigating risk, uncertainty, and the responsibility in holding all that is beginning to take its toll. And when I was leading the school counselling team, a lot of the counsellors would share that term 3 was often the hardest. It felt like a real slog. And this wasn't because they cared less, not because they were less committed, but because they had been carrying a great deal for so long, over a long time, and working and navigating in systems that don't make room for the impact of everything that they've been carrying. And I guess if we zoom out a little bit, and I'm not just thinking of school counsellors right now, but also practitioners who are working in private practice or in systems like child safety, what I'm noticing is that many people are holding even more things. So right now, we're working in a time of significant change across the health, the mental health, disability, and community sectors. So what I mean by that is that there are ongoing shifts in funding and service systems. So in particular in the NDIS space, reforms such as the Thriving Kids reforms are beginning to shape the landscape of what practitioners are working in. Cost of living pressures are affecting not only the children and families that we support, but us as practitioners too. Professional changes and uncertainty across different associations and pathways and broader systems are also leaving many people feeling quite unsettled and stretched and not quite where they thought they would be in their professional lives. So all of these things exist alongside the work itself, which is already really demanding. To work therapeutically with children and families is to be in an ongoing relationship with complexity. It's to sit with grief, distress, rupture, uncertainty, dysregulation, systemic limitations, and the slow pace of meaningful change. It's to hold hope on behalf of others, even when things feel really messy and unclear. It's really beautiful work, it's rewarding work, but it also comes at a cost as well. So that's why practitioner wellbeing can't be treated as an optional extra or an individual afterthought. When the pressure keeps building, our own wellbeing can quickly slide to the bottom of the list. We tell ourselves that we'll slow down later, we'll rest later, reflect later, tend to ourselves later. But sustainable practice is not built by indefinitely pushing through. It's built by learning to notice earlier, responding sooner, and honour the needs of the nervous system, our body, mind, and heart before we reach the point of depletion. So when we talk about sustainable practice asks something different of us. It asks us to recognize that our well-being is not separate from our work, but it is part of the foundation of our work. The way that we care for ourselves shapes our capacity to stay present, reflective, boundaried, compassionate, and connected. It influences how we listen, how we regulate, how we make decisions, how we repair after and regulate after those really hard, intense sessions, and how we continue to show up with integrity. So that's why in this particular podcast episode and over the next a few episodes in particular, I'm going to explore a series really focused on practitioner wellbeing and sustainable trauma responsive practice. So in this particular podcast episode, I'm going to explore 7 different types of rest. And over the next couple of conversations, we'll start to explore and unpack when a session stays with us long before after it's ended. We'll explore around how boundaries are an essential part of ethical and sustainable practice. We'll have a conversation about how when our own parts show up in our work or in the therapy room. And I'll also have a bit of a conversation about, a different approach to self-care and well-being, which is really informed around our own inner world and our different parts of ourselves. So in this episode of the podcast, I want to begin by exploring rest, because for many of us, and perhaps for me as well, rest is both deeply needed, but surprisingly, it's actually quite complicated. So exploring the 7 different types of rest for me became a really important part of my own recovery and healing from trauma. And just reflecting back, I remember the moment that my doctor told me that probably one of the most important things that I could do for my nervous system, which had been living under chronic stress for many years, was to rest. And at that time, that wasn't an easy message for me to receive. Rest had never felt simple or natural to me. In actual fact, it often felt deeply uncomfortable. For me, it could feel undeserved, unproductive, even unsafe. And I have absorbed, in both subtle and obvious ways, the belief that rest was something that you'd earned only after everything else was done. It was always work first, meeting everyone else's needs first, then rest after, if there was anything left, any time left. So I've done a lot of reflecting around where those particular beliefs had come from. And I think perhaps they were shaped by personal history, by chronic stress, by family narratives, by the values of Western culture, or by the expectations that are often placed on women to keep going, keep functioning, keep carrying. Wherever those particular beliefs have come from, I'd well and truly internalized the idea that hard work came first and rest came later. What I hadn't understood was that rest isn't simply a reward at the end of effort. Rest is actually a biological, emotional, relational, and spiritual need. And for those of us doing deeply relational and emotionally demanding work, rest isn't actually separate from good practice. It's actually part of what makes good practice possible. So when I first thought about rest, I imagined holidays, sleep, switching off, laying down, doing absolutely nothing. And while those things can absolutely be part of rest, I came to realize that rest is actually much broader than that. We don't only become tired in one way, so we cannot always be restored in one way either. Sometimes we're physically tired, sometimes we're emotionally overloaded, sometimes we're mentally exhausted, and sometimes we are spiritually disconnected, socially drained, flat creatively, and sensory overwhelmed. And these different types of depletion require different types of care. So I guess for me, that's where the framework of the 7 different types of rest can be so helpful. It gives us a language to better understand what's happening within us, and it invites us to respond with more intention and self-compassion. So I'm going to take a little bit of time now to explore the 7 different types of rest a little bit more deeply for you. So the first one that we'll look at is around physical rest. So when we talk about physical rest, it's about honouring the needs of our body. It includes the obvious forms of rest such as sleep, laying down, slowing down, taking time to recover physically. But it can actually also include more active forms of physical restoration as well, such as resting, gentle movement, massage, warm baths, getting outside, noticing the places in our body where we've been bracing all day and inviting them to soften. So for practitioners, physical rest matters because therapeutic work is not only cognitive or emotional, but it's also embodied. We hold tension in our shoulders, in our jaw, our stomach, in our back, and in our breath. We sit for long periods of time and we move between sessions with little pause. We carry stress physically, often without realizing it. So when we think about physical rest, we can ask, what does my body need in order to feel supported, replenished, and less burdened? When we think about emotional rest is about having spaces where we don't need to perform wellness, composure, or professionalism. It's the kind of rest that comes when we can be honest about what we're carrying, acknowledge the impact of the work, and let yourself feel what is true without needing to minimize it, package it up, or hold it all together for others. For us as child therapists or practitioners working with children and families, emotional rest can be especially important because the work asks us to be emotionally attuned while also regulated and contained. We're often tracking multiple emotional worlds all at once, such as the child, the parent, the families, the systems, but also our own. And over time, that can become that can become really heavy. Emotional rest might look like supervision that truly makes room for you, conversations with trusted colleagues, journaling, therapy, tears, naming what feels hard, or simply allowing yourself to stop being the one who holds everyone else for a moment. Emotional rest asks, where do I get to be real, and where can I put some of this down? When we think about mental rest is about supporting the thinking mind. It's about what helps when your thoughts feel crowded, your attention feels fragmented, your brain feels like it has too many tabs open all at once. Practitioners working with children and families are often holding a huge amount of mental load. And this includes remembering details across multiple clients, planning sessions, writing notes, making clinical decisions, coordinating with systems, assessing risk, responding to emails, constantly shifting gears throughout the day. And even when we finish work, our minds can still be switched on. Mental rest might include things like taking proper pauses between sessions, reducing multitasking, building quieter transitions into the day, limiting information input, brain dumping tasks onto paper, having moments where your mind is not required to solve, analyze, or organize. So mental rest asks, what would help my mind feel less crowded and more spacious? When we think about spiritual rest, spiritual rest is not necessarily about religion, though it can be for some people. More broadly, it's about connection to meaning, purpose, values, and the deeper why beneath what you do. It's the kind of rest that comes when you reconnect with what matters most, when you remember that you are more important than your output. For helping professions, it can be easy to become consumed by demands, by paperwork, crisis, the day-to-day pace of service delivery. Spiritual rest invites us to step back and reconnect with what anchors us. It helps us remember the heart of the work, our values, our humanity, and what gives us a sense of meaning. So this might look like spending time in nature, connecting to country, prayer, reflection, meditation, having meaningful conversations, creative ritual, didiri, stillness, reconnecting with the values that guide your practice. So spiritual rest asks, what reconnects me meaning? What reconnects me with meaning, purpose, and the deeper parts of myself? Social rest is about honouring our relational needs with more intention. It involves noticing that not all connection restores us in the same way. Some interactions leave us feeling nourished and seen and settled, while others leave us feeling more drained, overstimulated, or disconnected from ourselves. As practitioners, we often spend our days in high contact roles. We are listening, attuning, responding, giving, holding, relating for much of the day. Even if we deeply value connection and being connected with others, we can still become socially depleted. Social rest may mean spending time with people who feel easy, safe, and mutually nourishing. It may also mean saying no to demands for social energy, reducing contact when needed, and allowing yourself solitude without feeling guilty. So social rest asks, What relationships restore me, and where might I need more space? So when we think about sensory rest responds to the impact of overstimulation. Modern life asks a lot of our senses. Screens, bright lights, traffic, noise, constant notifications, busy clinics, shared spaces, fluorescent lighting, and ongoing input of the day can leave our nervous system feeling overloaded. For us therapists, sensory load can be especially significant. We may be moving between noisy environments, richly stimulating play spaces, emotionally charged sessions, computer work, phones, and the sensory demands of being constantly alert and responsive. So sensory rest may look like turning down noise, stepping away from screens, sitting in silence, dimming lights, reducing background stimulation, spending time in nature, limiting digital input, or simply having moments where your nervous system is not being asked to take in so much. So sensory rest asks, what is overwhelming my system right now, and how can I create more sensory spaciousness? So when we think about creative rest, it's about allowing yourself to receive beauty, wonder, inspiration, playfulness, and imagination without needing to produce anything in return. And it's restorative in a different way. It helps soften the pressure of constant output and invites us back into curiosity and aliveness. So this kind of rest matters because so much of our work relies on creativity. We're constantly adapting, responding, imagining possibilities, making meaning, and being flexible in the room. And over time, creativity can become something we only use in service of our work rather than something that we get to experience for ourselves. Creative rest might include spending time in nature again, engaging with music, art, colour, stories, play, beauty, or spaces that awaken delight and imagination. It might also mean letting yourself enjoy creative experiences without needing them to be productive, therapeutic, or useful. So creative rest asks, what helps me feel inspired, playful, and connected to beauty again? When we begin to understand rest in this broader way, it can open up a gentler and more practical path towards our well-being. Instead of asking ourselves why a weekend away didn't fix everything, we can ask more compassionate questions like, what kind of tired am I? Because sometimes we need more sleep, sometimes we need less noise, sometimes we need space to cry, and sometimes we need time alone, time in nature, a good supervision conversation, a moment of beauty or playfulness. Each form of rest offers an opportunity to notice and respond to a different need within ourselves. So this is where I'd encourage you to begin. Take some time to sit with each of those 7 types of rest and reflect gently. Where am I currently getting enough? Where do I feel depleted? What am I already doing that supports me? And what feels missing? What small practices can I begin to build in more intentionally? Try not to only think about those big, obvious, once in a while forms of rest, like those big holidays or those types of things, but also think about those micro practices that you can do, that you can fit into everyday life. So sustainable practice is rarely built through the occasional grand gestures alone. More often, it's shaped through small, repeatable moments of responsiveness to ourselves. Things like a few minutes of quiet between sessions, a slower lunch, a walk outside, a conversation with a trusted colleague, stretching your shoulders before you do your case notes, turning off notifications for an hour, sitting in the car for a minute before going outside, letting phone calls go to voice message and you get back to them when you're ready. Choosing not to fill every empty space in your day. These small moments matter. And once you've identified what might support you, I want to gently encourage you to actually book those in your calendar, not as an optional extra, not as something that you will get to if everything else feels finished, not as a reward for overextending yourself, but as part of the infrastructure and foundation that supports your well-being, your professional longevity, and your capacity to keep doing meaningful work with children and families in a way that's sustainable. Your well-being matters and your sustainability in this work matters. So if this conversation or this particular reflection has resonated with you, or you found yourself thinking, I might actually need some support with this is where reflective supervision can be a really meaningful next step. It can offer you a dedicated space to pause and to reflect. Think more deeply about your practice, the complexity that you're holding, and what sustainability might actually look like for you in this season of your work. It's often in those spaces that we can begin to notice what we need and start to untangle what feels heavy and find a way back to a more grounded and supported way of working. So if you're looking for a reflective space or reflective support in your work with children, parents and families, please reach out to me here at Children's Therapy Tasmania, and we can have a conversation about what it is that you need and what it is that you're looking for, because the support starts with a conversation, right? Until next time, take care.